Picture this. It's the middle of the 6th century, and one of the most powerful rulers in southern Arabia is launching a massive military expedition straight across the desert. Now, according to Islamic tradition, this campaign was heading for Mecca, and it ended in literally one of the most extraordinary events in history. So today, in this explainer, we're diving into a genuinely epic, cinematic slice of late antique history, the Expedition of Abraha. But here's the big question. What do archaeology, ancient inscriptions carved right into desert rocks, and historical chronicles actually tell us about this story? Well, let's look at the hard evidence, alongside the rich literary traditions, to uncover the truth about an army that shaped the entire destiny of the Arabian Peninsula.
So here's the roadmap for our investigation today. First, we'll survey the geopolitical crime scene of the 6th century, look at the rise of King Abraha, and explore his grand Cathedral of Sana'a. From there, we'll decode the ancient Muryagan inscriptions, compare them with a traditional Year of the Elephant narrative, and finally, see how this whole expedition sits right at the crossroads of history.
All right, part 1, the geopolitical crime scene, superpowers of the 6th century. To really grasp the sheer scale of Abraha's expedition, we kind of have to zoom out first. You see, 6th century Arabia wasn't just some isolated desert. It was a highly volatile, highly strategic buffer zone caught right between two rival global superpowers. As we can see on this timeline, the Roman-Persian wars had been raging for centuries. You've got the Byzantine Empire on one side, led by Emperor Justinian I, and the Sassanid Persian Empire on the other. And both of these massive powers were desperately trying to secure buffer zones and control the unbelievably lucrative trade routes running through Arabia. The Byzantines were using the Sassanids as their proxies in Syria, while the Persians backed the Lakhmids over in Mesopotamia. And right in the middle of all this, especially as tensions boiled over during conflicts like the Lazic War in 541 CE, southern Arabia, which is modern-day Yemen, became an absolutely crucial chess piece. Now, the Byzantines desperately needed a way to break the Persian grip on those vital incense routes. Their solution? A strategic alliance with the Aksumite kingdom of Ethiopia. Basically, Emperor Justinian pushed the idea of using Christianity as a unifying force to counter Persian influence. Because the Aksumites were Christian and geographically right next door to South Arabia, the Byzantines actually backed an Aksumite invasion of the kingdom of Himyar in Yemen around 525 CE. The goal was to oust a Jewish king there who had aligned himself with Persian interests. Okay, moving on to part 2, the rise of King Abraha, from general to autonomous ruler. So, out of the dust of that chaotic invasion steps the main subject of our historical mystery, Abraha. He was an Aksumite military commander. Though it's interesting, some Byzantine sources like Procopius actually claim he started out as a slave to a Roman merchant before working his way up the military ranks. Regardless, we know he took part in that Byzantine-backed invasion of South Arabia in 525 CE. But here's the thing, Abraha wasn't the kind of guy to just take orders. Backed by dissident Aksumite soldiers who wanted to settle down in the fertile lands of Yemen, he actually overthrew the viceroy appointed by the Aksumite King Khalib. And when Khalib sent armies to crush his rebellion, Abraha either defeated them or completely flipped them to his side, effectively making himself the undisputed, autonomous ruler of Yemen. And what he did next brilliantly illustrates his political genius. Abraha didn't just rule, he consolidated a massive desert empire. He adopted these incredibly grandiose traditional titles of South Arabian monarchs, styling himself the king of Saba, Duriden, Hadramaweth, and Yamnat. He crushed local revolts, defeated the formidable Ma'ad tribal confederation, and then, to hold this whole giant puzzle together, he cleverly appointed North Arabian chieftains from tribes like Kalb and Taglib to act as his proxy rulers. Under Abraha, nearly the entire Arabian Peninsula, except for Persian-controlled Oman, fell directly under his sphere of influence. Which brings us to part 3, the Cathedral of Sana'a, a monument of faith and power. You know, Abraha understood that to truly control Arabia, pure military might just wasn't going to cut it. He needed to shift the cultural and religious center of gravity. So to cement his power and really broadcast his Christian faith, he launched these incredibly ambitious architectural projects. And the crown jewel was a magnificent church in his capital of Sana'a. In historical texts, this structure is famously known as Al-Kulais. The scale of this project was honestly staggering. The name Al-Kulais actually comes from the Greek word ekklesia, meaning church. According to historical sources, Abraha even wrote to the Byzantine emperor to ask for help, and the emperor actually sent over craftsmen along with massive amounts of Roman marble and stunning mosaics. But we need to remember, this wasn't just a place of worship. It was a calculated geopolitical tool. Abraha built it specifically to divert the incredibly lucrative Arab pilgrimage traffic away from existing centers, most notably the Kaaba and Mecca. And as you can probably guess, trying to hijack the region's religious economy, that sparked some deep, deep tensions with the local tribes. Part 4. The Moroccan Inscriptions, the stones speak. All right, now let's look at the hard, physical evidence historians rely on to track Abraha's actual military campaigns. Because here, the stones quite literally speak. What you're seeing here is the Murugan I rock inscription, sometimes called Rai 506. It was discovered in the mid-20th century, and it is the contemporary primary source evidence. It proves, without a shadow of a doubt, that Abraha was a real, historical figure who launched a massive military incursion deep into Central Arabia. The translation of this ancient text is just absolutely fascinating. It starts out by the power of the merciful and his messiah, King Abraha Zibman, inscribed this text when he raided Ma'd for the 4th time. It then goes on to detail exactly how his forces split up, conquered the local tribes, took prisoners, and seized a ton of booty. But the crucial takeaway here is what these epigraphic discoveries reveal about his route. The inscriptions confirm a massive campaign pushing into the Hijaz and Najd regions. They clearly document that his forces reached and captured Yathrib, which is modern-day Medina, and scientists have dated this precisely to around 552 CE. We've even found associated rock art at a place called Bir Hima depicting African war elephants, confirming the Aksumite military practice of using them in battle. But here is the real kicker. While these stones detail victories over tribes and the capture of Yathrib, they notably lack any explicit mention of Mecca. This brings us to Part 5, the Year of the Elephant, when history meets tradition. So this is exactly where the hard archaeological evidence intersects with rich literary and religious tradition. Let's impartially compare these two lenses. On one side, the epigraphic evidence points to a campaign around 552 CE, heavily focused on the Ma'd Confederation and the capture of Yathrib, but with no mention of Mecca. On the other side, early Islamic literary traditions and histories describe an expedition aimed squarely at destroying the Kaaba in Mecca. They mention the use of about 13 war elephants, and this is traditionally dated later, to around 570 CE, which is widely recognized as the birth year of the Prophet Muhammad. In this tradition, the Meccans realize they simply cannot fight this massive army, so they retreat to the mountains and leave the city's defense entirely to the divine. This pivotal event is famously preserved in the 105th chapter of the Quran, Surah Al-Fil, or the Elephant. It reads, "Have you not considered how your Lord dealt with the companions of the elephant? Did he not make their plan into misguidance? And he sent against them birds and flocks, striking them with stones of hard clay." The text describes a miraculous divine intervention that completely annihilates Abraha's forces. It is a deeply foundational narrative in Islamic history that symbolizes the ultimate sanctity of Mecca. So, looking through the lens of modern secular history, we have to ask a really compelling question. What actually stopped the most powerful army in Arabia from achieving total dominance? Well, historians and scientists have debated this one heavily. The leading scientific theory points to the outbreak of a severe epidemic. Interestingly, the Scottish physician and explorer James Bruce actually found an Ethiopian chronicle describing the defeat of the Aksumite army by what seemed to be a horrific disease. Building on that, some modern historians suggest that the Quranic stones of hard clay might be an allegorical description of smallpox pustules breaking out among the troops. Then, of course, you have to factor in the sheer logistical nightmare of trying to march African war elephants through the brutally harsh, waterless terrain of Western Arabia. Between a potential plague and desert logistics, the army's supply lines likely just collapsed.
And finally, Part 6, Crossroads of History, the End of an Era.
So what's the big takeaway? How did this event actually reshape the world? Well, Abraha's campaign, whether you place it in 552 or 570 CE, marked the absolute zenith of Aksumite Christian power in Arabia. But as we know, empires are incredibly fragile. After Abraha died, a massive power vacuum opened up. Local Himyarite factions, who were totally fed up with Aksumite rule, ended up reaching out to the Sassanid Persians for help. And between 570 and 575 CE, the Sassanid king Khosrow sent in his troops, successfully driving the Aksumites out for good and pulling Yemen firmly into the Persian sphere of influence. These solitary ancient steles, left standing alone in the desert, perfectly illustrate our conclusion today. Whether you're analyzing the inscriptions carved into the rocks at Maragon or reading the sacred verses of the Quran, the expedition of Abraha marks the absolute closing chapter of late antiquity in Arabia. The great foreign powers, Byzantium, Persia, Aksum, had pretty much exhausted themselves fighting proxy wars over these sands.
And by failing to secure total dominance, Abraha's campaign inadvertently preserved the independence of the Hijaz region. It literally set the stage for the rise of a native, unifying institutional religion, Islam, just a few decades later. How did a single, mysterious desert campaign pave the way for a new world order that would transform history forever? It really just goes to show how fragile empires truly are, and how one single expedition can echo through eternity. Thanks for joining me for this explainer, and remember to keep questioning the history beneath your feet.